Good afternoon, Denise.
Hello.
Good afternoon. How's that?
That's good on this end.
I have to remember to turn on my speakers.
It's always those little technical issues, isn't it?
Operator error.
Related to their community for the good of the order that you'd care to share?
Well, we had a great meeting with Scott, the mayor of Monmouth, and our city manager. And so anyone who has an opportunity to set up a meeting with Scott, do it. He's awesome.
You need to talk to my wife.
Commissioner Cameron, welcome. We haven't seen you for a while. How are things going in your neck of the woods?
Well, Commissioner Bethel couldn't make it, so I'm the what do you call it? The stand-in.
Stand-in.
Well, thank you for
things have been pretty busy.
thank you for
Yeah, it's raining right now up here in Detroit. Out on the way up this afternoon, it was horrid in the canyon, but
This is good.
not a lot on this side of the dam. We don't want it too fast.
Yeah.
Mudslides.
Sal, might I suggest that as we wait for people to join us, maybe we can go out of order and have the executive director report, since it's a report without action item. We can all listen to that, and while we wait for everybody else to join us.
Can we do that without a quorum? If that's allowable, let's do that. Good idea, John.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's a report. There's no action.
Okay. Then with that, let's move out of order, and we'll move the executive director report to the top, since it doesn't contain an action item. Scott, do you want to go ahead and give that report?
Yes, sir. Back to the board. I have an obligation under the resolution that you folks adopted in 2020. It is now our 15th month of COVID related restrictions. So I have extended it until the end of this month. We're beginning to get reports, I think all of you are, about how close we all are to the possibility of opening back up. So we're beginning to have those discussions inside about the correct protocols. I would remind our board, just as a side, as far as COVID has been concerned, we've been able to serve our membership and have actually done a lot this year, considering how much money kind of flowed through the organization and onto places. We've been out and about with our membership. So we have always had a flexing workforce, a lot of field serving you folks at your places of business. I think the difference has been over the year, it's probably been on a Zoom camera. The other thing I wanted to report to the board, one of the things that we are trying to target is that we would start our new way of doing things after July 1st. I think we'll have better direction, hopefully by then, about the conditions and the needs. But at a minimum, I think that will allow us to open doors, have mail delivered here, do some other of the more basic things. Our next real big meetings don't really start happening until August and September. So I think there will be time to do that. In the meanwhile, staff has been working on a proposal. Renata's group went ahead and applied for some EDA dollars to improve our conference room. One of the things that we've learned is that meeting like this, while it's inconvenient on one level, it actually allows a lot of people to attend the meeting. As such, we are trying to look at I'm going to call it AV, audio visual. Remember the kid pushing the cart down the hall with all the stuff on top of it, the slide machine and everything. But I think we're that close to being able to do better meetings in our conference rooms both ways, cameras the ability to interact better so that people can both be meeting in place. And if you're, I know all of you get so busy, if you've had 6 meetings that day, you know, driving might all of a sudden take you out of contention here, but the ability to flex and be able to come in electronically where we can see you, where you can interact, where you can see all the materials, I actually think maybe one of the advantages we have coming out of all of this. So we are working on that. A lot of it just has to do with protocols, you know, those kinds of things. I will tell the board, I don't relish being a COVID vaccination policeman. I want to protect our workforces. I want to protect people coming in and out of the building. But you know, it would be nice if I wasn't asking for things like that at the door, and we could do it on a basis of trust. We don't have a lot of traffic anyways. However, what we are is a central meeting place. So we're going to try to improve our IT ability to do that, as well as get our meeting schedule. So we'll be reporting back to you as soon as we get better direction from where we think we are in both Marion County and in the state of Oregon. That is all I have to report on at this time.
Thank you, Scott. Do we, I see we have Mayor Swenson has joined and possibly one other person. Do we have a quorum now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Denise, can you go ahead and take roll so we can figure out who's present? I think you're on mute, Denise.
Sorry about that. It didn't want to unmute. Technology, yay. All right. We have, let's see. We have Ian Davidson from Salem Kaiser Transit. Sharon Blasey, or is it Blasey? I'm sorry.
It's Sharon Blasey.
Thank you.
And so just so you know, Denise, depending on the quorum number, I do have to leave no later than 4:40 because we do have a school board meeting tonight, starting with an executive session. So I'm going to have to leave. So I don't know if that's going to impact your quorum for a vote on the budget.
Hopefully we'll be able to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Jackie Frankie from Chemeketa Community College. Mayor Linda Watkins from Carlton for the small cities of Yamhill County. John McCardle, Mayor of Independence for the small cities of Polk County. Jim Kingsbury, Mayor of Sublimity for the small cities of Marion County. Mayor Eric Swenson from Woodburn. Councilor Roxanne Galtz from Monmouth. Councilor Peralta from McMinnville, our chair. Mayor Kathy Clark from Kaiser. Mayor Brian Dalton from Dallas. And Mayor Cameron for Marion County as an alternate for Commissioner Bedell.
Thank you, Denise. And I appreciate that. We'll go ahead and skip through the introductions, and I'd like to move on to agenda item C, which is the public comment period. Denise, do we have anybody who has signed up for public comment today? Wonderful. Then with hearing no action on that public comment section, let's move on to the consent calendar.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved by John McCardle and seconded by Kathy Clark, I believe, to move the consent calendar. Is there any
Seconded by Roxanne, sorry.
Oh, thank you, Roxanne. I couldn't see. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please
Aye.
signify. Any opposed, same side?
Aye.
I jumped through that too quickly. I'm sorry. Were there any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it unanimously. Thank you very much. With that, let's move on to agenda item E, informational items. This is in pages 9 through 11 in your packet. With that, I'll turn it over to Scott Dadson for the financial report.
All right, and I'm going to turn it over to Amber. Amber?
Well, I wasn't prepared to talk about the report.
Sure you were. Sure you were.
I don't even have it in front of me, in fact.
Okay, well, I'm going to just make a note while Amber is looking at the memorandum that was sent. This is on pages 9 through 11 in the packet,
Right.
dated June 15th.
Right.
And this relates to the member services, administrative services, and transportation program. Amber, did I give you enough time to?
Yeah, you gave me enough time to find
Bring
it.
it up.
I just really don't, honestly, I don't know what to say about it. I didn't come prepared to speak about it.
Okay. All right. Well, I will.
I'll go ahead and just and kick in here. These are reports through April. So we're reconciling May now. We had some other things that we had to deal with to close out May. So we'll have May closed out hopefully by the week's end. Our member services, we received 112% of anticipated coverage. So for the board's information, that's the area you control the most. Our member service dues and those rates and things like that. And we received what we thought we would do. So we'll have a carry forward lower than anticipated in the process, but considering our expenses were slightly above what was budgeted because of executive director searches, and those kinds of things with COVID, I think we're doing pretty well. Administrative services are lower than targeted, but so is revenue. But a lot of those things will catch up through May. So April's kind of a funny time to report out. And our transportation programs, again, a little bit behind, but it's only because we have a lag in receiving dollars in. And that's pretty much a theme as we go through. We are able to pretty much reconcile by year's end fairly well. And in economic development services, those are really related to the COVID-19 recovery efforts. So we are where we're supposed to be, a little bit behind, but we know that by the end of May, we'll be able to reconcile most of those things out.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, a little bit of a hiccup there, just because I think we're kind of we were new with the executive director and new with some of our staff with these reporting. So this is the first time we've done the reports in this way. So I apologize for that little bit of a hiccup. But with that, I'd like to go ahead and move to the department head reports. There's written reports in the packet, but if the individual department heads would like to comment on each individual section, that would be fine. I see the first one up is Renata, so I'll just hand it to you.
Chair, I think what we heard from the board during COVID is that even though these used to be informational items, that you would like us to give some highlights. So I've just pulled a few things. You've got my report on page 12 and 13 about various tasks. I am very pleased to report that the Resource Assistance for Rural Environments program has invited us to submit for a new candidate to assist in Sandium Canyon recovery efforts. Marion County is also applying for their own rare participant, and they have specific tasks they would like that person to be working on. But I've worked with county staff, got permission to apply for our own rare participant. That person will be assisting the communities with items such as the Main Street program, design standards, if they would like that. We received word from Pacific Power that they would like to fund the application. So again, with Marion County's permission, we accepted the award from Pacific Power, and they would like the rare participant, if we're successful in getting a candidate, to come up with a toolkit and do research about what are some hazard recovery options for property owners and for cities. They'll be looking at energy efficiency and energy reduction measures. Again, this is a toolkit. It's not a mandate for cities or residents, but really just providing resource materials. So starting next week, we have 3 candidates. who are rare participants who have expressed interest in serving in this region, and we'll be interviewing them and hopefully have somebody that can start in September. I also have to thank Scott and Mayor McCardle for making me aware of a program through Portland State University. It's called the Fellows Program, and I can share it with anybody who's on the board if you're interested in learning more. But for a small stipend, depending on whether you're doing a full year fellow, they call it, or a summer fellow, there's a match requirement. But for $6,000, we can do a summer fellow. And again, we're planning on using these, either undergraduate or graduate students. If we're successful, you have to have a match in what you're asking them to do and them having interest in doing the work. But for a small fee, I'm hoping we can get a Portland State University fellow to do some additional research and work for us that, again, can just be fed to assist the professional services that are happening up there in the communities. We have been providing feedback to Portland State University. I know that Mike Jaffe's transportation crew staff has also been working very closely with Portland State University, who's looking to update their population forecasts for the future. These are very important numbers. So I think Mike will speak more to that, but we've also been engaging in some phone calls with them when talking about our smaller communities. Again, Santiam Canyon Recovery, we've received a Department of Land Conservation Development grant award. We needed to expend that. It was $17,000 by June. So we're using that to support our planners' efforts and some surveying work that property owners needed up there. And then otherwise, I'm very happy to report that we've started providing planning services to the city of Carlton. That's fairly new. So welcome, Mayor. The city of Newburgh and Dundee contacted us. They have some staff transitions. And so for a short period of time, the next 3 months, likely, we will also be providing some planning services to them as they work to fill their position. So that's all I have, unless you have questions.
Thank you,
I have
Renata.
one,
Please go ahead.
one comment. Yeah, I just wanted to, and I was thinking after I made my introduction, I forgot to mention Kyle, and thank you guys. He's great. We've been just really appreciative of the work that he's done and the knowledge that he does have. So I think he's going to be a big help for the next year or so. Hopefully we'll see what happens.
He's in office today, and he said you guys are keeping him busy as well. So lots of development activity up in Carlton, as you were saying.
We're looking very hard at our development code, which we had let slide, and it's showing. So we really appreciate his work. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mayor Watkins, for those comments. Thank you, Renata, for the report. Does anybody have any questions, other questions for Renata?
Chair, this is Commissioner Cameron. I just want to echo Renata's check-in with Marion County, because our AmeriCorps individual will be focused on broadband as they were last year within Marion County. So not a conflict. In fact, it's a good thing for us all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments? Okay, with that, we will move on to John. Would you like to give a verbal report?
John's not on today. I'll do that report for him.
Okay.
The revolving loan fund, the RLF fund, administrative board approved a third loan out of the CARES Act grant. It was for a medical office in Salem by a tenant who's a chiropractor. And then the RLF loan participated with Willamette Valley Bank on that. Of course, this board and the RLF BDI board approved defederalizing revolving loan funds. They have a revolving loan fund defederalization, and they're moving through that. The COG loan program providing services to Pioneer Trust under the Payroll Protection Program, second round of financing. We were working with Pioneer Trust Bank on the first round, and as of May, the SBA loan program will be ending the end of May. Current loan program is preparing loan applications under the EDA CARES Act revolving loan, the Marion RLF, and the SBA intermittent area relending RLF and as well as migrating data from current loan program tracking software into a new platform. And that is the action that is going on there. The VDI board met last week in their budget committee and will finish their budget work this week as well. Next week.
Thank you, Scott.
Yes,
Any questions for that report? No. Hearing none, I'd like to move on to Mike. Mike, are you here? I can't see. Yes, I can see you on the call.
Turn on my microphone. Good afternoon. So for transportation, the Area Commission on Transportation met twice in the quarter in May and June. In May, ODOT gave a presentation on the crashes along Highway 99E in Marion County. This is in response to, I think, Commissioner Davidson's request, because there had been some fatal crashes on 99E this past year. So it took a couple months for ODOT staff to gather the information, put together a presentation about a kind of a history of crash rates along the highway in the last approximately 20 years, I believe. And the good news, there's good news and bad news. The good news is the crash rates are lower than they used to be in the 90s, the middle 90s, but they're still an issue. So although ODOT has done various engineering improvements, the problem still seems to be alcohol-related crashes, particularly for the serious and fatal crashes. But there still is a list of projects they're going to implement along that highway, and I thought it was a pretty interesting report for the area to kind of come up to date with what's going on that important highway. We had a presentation about the facility plan for Highway 18 near Fort Hill. It's near Grand Ron and the Spirit Mountain Casino. ODOT's been planning that for a while. Over the last year, they're currently at the stage of developing 3 concepts of interchanges where Highway 22 comes into Highway 18. There is a website you can view the concepts. You can also watch a virtual open house they held a couple weeks ago. And then in June, ODOT had more of a discussion about funding. So the State Commission is providing $65 million in enhanced funds, which sounds like a lot, but statewide isn't really all that much. But they are still seeking ideas for how to use those with a focus on relieving congestion and freight type projects. So with those kind of parameters in mind, our commission had a discussion of what we want to propose from our area. And they came up with 3 project ideas, $5 million toward the Newburgh-Dundee bypass project, $10 million to work on the southbound widening of I-5 in South Salem, and anywhere between $1 and $8 million for projects on Oregon 22E, that's also known as Mission Street here in South Salem. So it was a good discussion, and those projects are going to be forwarded up the chain along with all the other projects in the state, and we'll see over the next couple of months what may happen. I should also note it's not in the board minutes, or sorry, the COG board minutes, but ODOT continues to try to get additional funding for the Aurora Donald interchange. So they're going forward with phase 1, which is the $50 million phase. They're still seeking $26 million more. We've been to the commission to try to get those funds. We weren't successful. So now there's a federal grant that's been applied for, and hopefully we'll know in the next couple of months if that 26 million or part of it may be awarded. And now moving back to the MPO, there's a lot of things I could talk about that's in the report, but Renata mentioned the population forecasts. As you can imagine, transportation planning is hard to do if you don't have population forecasts of what's going to happen in the future. And Portland State and the Population Research Center is required by state statute to do all the population forecasting by county and UGBs. And they do it for every county every 4 years. So they came out with the draft forecasts for Marion, Polk County, and I think it was Lynn and Benton, some other ones, Lane County. And they were significantly different than the ones they had done 4 years ago, and significantly lower. So we had a lot of questions. So my staff alerted me to this. We developed a letter and a long memo that went to the Portland State Research Center, Population Research Center. So City of Salem also sent their own letter. We talked locally. And then on, when was this? May 14th, I think it was, we had a meeting with the Population Research Center going over our concerns. They took our concerns really as intended, and they're making some changes to those forecasts. We haven't seen the final results, but we expect them to be significantly different than the ones they proposed, so they're not such low forecasts. If you want additional information, we could supply you with the materials we sent them. But I think it's going to be a better forecast, a more reasonable forecast. And it's used for all sorts of things, everything from transportation to housing to everything else. So I'll stop there in case there's any questions.
Just one question from me, Mike. Do you have a sense that the population forecast is expecting to continue to grow at a pretty high level for this region?
It is, well, they do the forecasting, but they're expecting not quite as high as a forecast as they used to, because they're seeing a drop in birth rates, and they're also forecasting less in-migration. Now that may have changed after our meeting, because I think they're going to re-examine some of their methodologies for the in-migration. So there'll be growth, but maybe not as rapid growth for those two reasons.
Thank you, Mike. Does anybody on the board have questions for transportation? I see John's got his hand up. Go ahead, John.
Please, Mike, if you could send me the information related to population forecast, because I know the number of housing developments that we actually have turned in. I want to make sure that they understand where we are. And so if you could send that to me, and we can talk offline, or you might want to get with our staff, because of we're expecting another 1,000 houses here pretty quick.
Sure.
Second,
happy to do so.
I was reading last night that Aurora Donald, there's a significant in the infrastructure package. There is a whole bunch of money that was allocated, and I was just reading the bill last night, and I'm sorry I forgot what the number was. I saw too many numbers, but there's significant.
20 million, Mayor.
Was it 20 million?
It's 20 million.
Okay. So anyway, and finally, any change on where things are with 2251? I'm being the broken record here.
Well, news obviously is changing quickly. I haven't heard anything lately. What you just mentioned about the 20 million, I'm not familiar with myself. So
yeah, there was nothing for 2251 in that allocation.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything myself, but I'm not privy to all the changes and all the things going on.
Okay, well, I really appreciate you and many others continuing to put 2251 up there. I don't want it to get forgotten. Thank you.
Right, and I believe MWAC did a support letter because Commissioner Morthouse requested one, so, and that went out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Mayor McArdle. Does anybody else have any questions for Mike before we move on to the budget presentation? I can't see. Scott,
Linda Watkins. Linda Watkins.
Thank you. Linda, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. If I could get a copy of the population forecast also. Ours is maybe not necessarily so much concerned with housing as it is with traffic, but it would be really nice to have that as we continue conversations with ODOT regarding our bypass. So that would be great.
So what I will do, because I know you're in Yamhill County and Mayor McArdle's in Polk County, our attention was mostly on the Marion County forecast.
Was it? Okay, sorry.
But I'm happy to send you the link to where you can find their forecasts. Now they are revising them, so I don't know the status today of whether they've posted it. I don't think they have, but you might want to wait a little bit and see what they are, or you can look right now, but you might want to also look again in a few weeks.
Centrally, where we're located, we get cross traffic, and I think that's one of our concerns around here is that we do get a lot of commuter traffic through this area. So it comes from a lot of different directions, and that's a concern. So that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Watkins. Thanks, Mike. I see Mayor Kingsbury. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a question for Mike. I thought when when they do those population studies, that they don't take into account the developments that are going on or potential developments that could be going on. Is that right?
No, they do take into account. They contact the local jurisdictions and request kind of a history over the last couple years. I forget how many years going back of development. So they do want for their short-term forecasts, they want to see what is in the pipeline. But then for their 20 and 40-year forecasts, it's more of a number crunching exercise. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Mike. Sharon?
Thank you. So Mike, do you have any idea when they might be updating that forecast for Marion County? It sounds like you were hopeful that they might consider the numbers, because I know the school district is using the current numbers that were released for planning, because there were significantly lower for elementary and middle schools. So
yeah,
indication of when they might.
I wish I had an answer. The normal procedure is they put out these forecasts, and they did at the end of March. They have like a 45-day comment review period. And maybe they're not used to having people question or challenge their forecasts, but we had such a big issue with how they were done that maybe they're taking longer. So normally they were supposed to have them done by the middle of May. So now it's here in the middle of June. And I honestly haven't checked the website this week, but maybe they're taking a good long look before they repost their forecasts.
Thanks, Mike. I'll let, just in case he doesn't know, I'll let Mike both know that they might be re-looking at the data. Thank you.
Right. Great. Good information. Good questions. Thank you so much. Does anybody else have any questions for Mike? Okay, seeing none. With that, I'd like to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is a public hearing on the COG's proposed budget for 2021 and 2022. And with that, I would like to call that hearing, the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments budget hearing, to order at 4:03. With that, I'd like to call Scott Dadson to give his budget presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Denise, can you put that up for me? Thank you, ma'am. All right, we're going to put this in presentation mode. All right, next one, please. The this budget is for $7,779,767. It's an increase of around $796,000 or 11% from the current fiscal year. We're going to talk a little bit about why. As you could guess, it has more to do with some carryover programs from 2021, as well as some CARES Act issues in there as well. Next, please. The revenues by source are 21% federal. Designated in our fund balance reserves, that's a reflection of actually really great work in the business lending department. And we'll talk about that number in a second, but essentially that work that they did over there with plan protection loans really helped beef that up. And we have left that alone as an expenditure, but it does show up in the undesignated section of our budget in that 9%, which is a much larger number. Our local revenue is around 29%. Member dues, again, constitute about 3%. Next, please. So the requirements, the expenditures, again, you can see the undesignated reserve at 10% and designated at 28%. Designated comes down a bit simply because there will be monies released into loan programs. Undesignated went up because of the work of that group. Again, it's not noted in the expenditure section as specific expenditures. I think we want to see how EDA defederalization is going to move forward and how that shapes that program moving forward. So outside of some regular loan processes, those two numbers, undesignated looks much better. Undesignated is doing what it usually does in that regard. Grants and other loans to others, again, pass-throughs and other loans, materials and services at 24%. No capital outlay this year, outside of maybe a few computers and some things like that. We're going to talk about fiscal software, which we're doing in this current year here at the last action item. And then personnel services make up the majority of our expenditures. As you folks could imagine, we are mostly people. And that's our people do great work, and they're out there doing their programs and serving you folks in the region. Next, please. So the requirements by service, or the expenditures by service, again, around 34% in business lending, because we're lending. A lot of that represents lending dollars, not so much overhead costs. Transportation planning, which Mike was talking about, both sides of the report that they do, the MPO and then the larger conversations about transportation in the region. Member services around 17%. Our administrative services are our overhead, or our internal backbone of finance, administration, overhead, rents, things like that. And then community development rounds us out about 17%, and that is mostly indirect service allocation. Next, please. The beginning fund balance is what increases. The target per the board, I want to explain something per last year. Last year, or in the current budget year, you see a number of around 203 and undesignated. The board is trying to improve that every year. Because we had such a large surge, however, that looks larger than usual. And that is because of the one-time effect of the lending program. So it moves the target up a bit, folks. But what I would like you to know is that our fund balance is looking healthier this year than it did last year. And we have some room to for the VDI board and the COG board eventually to talk about how they're going to move forward with defederalization and some of the other programs in business lending. Next, please. Our org chart is more or less the same. One of the things I do want to comment on, folks, when we went into this budget year, last year was or the current fiscal year is I'll say this with a straight face, a rather strange year. We had higher inflows and outflows of dollars, but a lot of it was passed through. One-time kinds of things in relationship to COVID, the fires, the work that we're doing in the Sandian Canyon with Marion County and the communities in the Sandian Canyon. But our organization chart shows us looking the same. Now, two changes I did make, and we'll talk about those in another slide, but I want to mention here. The previous directors had recommended some communication specialists and HR specialists. And we're going to be talking about financial software here at the end. I've refocused that back into building because of outflows of people leaving for retirements and that kind of thing out of the organization. And we're building our backbone back in finance and in Amber's division. Next, please. So I want to focus on that instead of some of the other things. So this is our list of FTEs. We have increased by 0.47. Yeah, I didn't know you could do that with a billet, but you can, and that's just because of how we charge. Some of our folks understand that some of them do not work a full, what you would call a 40-hour work week. Some work part-time, some work three-quarter time, and that's based either upon the program or the arrangements and the kind of programs that we carry out. So total increase of 0.47. And again, that's building the backbone in finance. Next, please. So here's the approved work programs. You will notice in member services, our new initiatives are really the new accounting clerk, which really raised it by 0.5, and additional hours for the fiscal assistant, which was part-time. This is also so that we're building support, not only program specific in places like business lending, but also across the board in how we handle our finances in general. Next, please. Transportation planning GIS, one of our larger programs, folks. This is really reflective of some carryover in some programs. So you basically have the staff for SCATs, staff for MWAC, and then GIS services. Our full-time there is 8.66, but the new initiatives and changes are in really beefing up the safe routes to school coordinator area, and some seasonal relief to try to make sure that we're getting to safe routes. It'll be nice to see kids going back to school and really re-engaging. And we, I think, had a good year talking about safe routes, but to engage it even more in real time, and that'll be fantastic. And then a shift to full-time from admin to GIS. Next, please. In community development, the newest initiatives are carryovers from last year, and that's in grants and contracts to support wildlife recovery efforts with Marion County, the state, and others in the Sandian Canyon. So a lot of that has to do with doing that, as well as adding some additional capacity in grant writing and making sure that we're serving our members in that area and carrying those out. Next, please. Those understand, just note on what was there before, understand that number goes down, but then again, we had one-time dollars going through there. So it isn't because things change that much in regular ongoing contracts, but just simply the kinds of dollars that pass through in the current fiscal year compared to this proposed year. In business lending, again, a lot of the effort is going to be on the defederalization and then work in what's called the SBA 7 Community Advantage 7A programs. And that would be where we're spending our time with that. Next, please. And those dollars are really about the overhead to carry it out. And that's a loan officer, another loan officer, and then support staff to make sure that those loans get processed. In our net income, we received a lot of dollars and we have loaned money out, but those monies take time to come back. In the defederalization and with the 7A program, I think it is John's intent to see that we build those programs up and where those are going. But those will also be future conversations for both the VDI board and the COG board, and to see where we can go in the Community Advantage 7A program. Next, please. Administration overhead, in the comparisons of the 2 years, there are no real new initiatives other than to beef up the backbone of finance. I think we have a misspelling there. I think that means to be fiscal year 2021 and 21-22. But we're trying to build up the backbone in finance, and make sure that we have a new operating system and that we are accounting for those things as we move forward. Next, please. So in the summary of changes, again, lots more work in grants or contracts for wildfire recovery. And we are getting weekly calls about contracts in other areas. Carlton's a good example of where we're stepping up to help out, or we're substituting in short term in Newburgh and Dundee. And we're getting more inquiries. And as a matter of fact, when I get off of this meeting, I'm helping the city of Dundee in their administrator search. So I'll be attending that meeting later this evening, talk about that. So there are those kinds of services that we keep doing. Again, addition of the seasonal relief on safe routes for schools. Again, that's a really important program, and we see a big future for that. Next, please. Again, our future challenges are the same with everyone. Short-term inflationary issues, whether those will go long, that's not on here, but the cost of fuel and impacts from inflation we've noted as always being futures. We don't have as much, but that may affect reimbursement rates for gasoline and things like that. It may affect you folks more, especially if you have services that are out there on the streets, school buses, fire trucks, police cars, and those kinds of things. And then again, we have had a kind of a reprieve with COVID. I know that sounds like a strange thing to say on health insurance costs, but I expect as part of inflation and the outcome of this, we in our conversations with CIS, our providers, we see health insurance, we're okay next year, but and we have rates that we can afford, but I do anticipate rising health insurance costs year over year to start back on their track as they did before. Next, please. Okay, and that's the presentation of the budget. And if I can, Mr. Chairman, if I can answer any questions or
We'll defer the questions
Okay.
for a moment. I just wanted to acknowledge that Commissioner Kula has arrived.
Sorry, I was
I-
late. Thank you.
I wanted to make a note that the Budget Committee met on June 1st and recommended approval of this budget as presented. With that, I'd like to open the floor for any public comments. Has anyone from the public come to provide testimony? And that is for Denise. Denise is shaking her head no. So with that, I'd like to open the floor for any discussion or comments on the budget as presented by Scott. I don't see any hands up. Does anybody? Oh, I do see hands now.
Real hands.
Real hands. Okay. We'll start with Commissioner Cameron and then go to Sharon.
Yeah, Scott, thank you. And Danielle had asked me, I think it's in your budget message, about the members' dues increase of 4.7%. And is that increase still valid with and I think that's based on population forecast as well as, I'm not sure because I haven't been here for a while, some formula that the board adopted in 2020 or 2019.
Yes, I can answer that by the board adopted the rates in December of this fiscal year that are used for the next year, and we use CPI of 1.8% from Seattle. Amber, am I correct in that number, ma'am?
That's correct. Yes, it's a combination of the CPI plus the population estimate. So you'll see an overall difference of 4%, but the rates really increased to 1.8 for the CPI.
Yeah, 1.8 was the baseline increase, and then if populations changed.
Well, that would be my question, since the population forecast that came out in March was extremely low. We all, I'm just curious, is that based on a 1-year increase of population, a 5-year increase? And then the last part of that question was mine. What about the fire impacted cities that have had a loss of revenue? Because I think that budget's based on 100% participation.
I'm going to let Renata answer the first part of the question first on, she had her hand raised, and then I'm going to deal with the smaller cities. Go ahead,
Okay,
Renata.
so thank you. It's a very good question. The terminology used by PSU, they use two, and I may be reversing them, but they use population projection and then estimate. So every year, Portland State University provides a snapshot in time for the estimate for the year. That's what we use. So we were earlier talking about projections where they're going out 40 years. What is our population going to look like? So we use the estimate for the region that's locked in time, not projecting forward of what we think might be in 6 months. And then very good question about members, Scott.
Yeah, on that, I do know, and you're talking about the communities in the canyon. They were, Mr. Cameron, they were able to make their dues this year. They are, Detroit, for example, is 1,311. That's their total dues package, as well as I think 156 for EDA dollars. And so I think the same would be true of Gates is also true. Donna, that's the only one. Yes, 1311 as well.
Okay, if that's all it is, it's not going to be a problem because I think we're getting some.
Yes, sir.
Placement money for them from the legislature and some other ways. So.
Yeah, and our smaller towns do benefit from that.
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Cameron. Does that answer your question? Yeah, thumbs up. Okay, great. Sharon?
Thank you. So quick question one quick comment, I think at the beginning, and it's probably just the slide, but just making sure it's not on the budget document. I think your fiscal year is off. Because I think the original part of the presentation referred to fiscal year 2021/21. So it could just be the slide.
I think it's the slide. Thank you
Okay,
for noting.
thanks.
That.
Yeah.
It is the slide on it.
Question I have is, where are we with regards to funding and in this budget for the homelessness work? So the shift from the balance of state to the COG taking over that work for this area. Is that going to have a budget impact this year, this coming year?
It has a small one only because we do the fiscal services for that group. If grants come through, that would have an effect and the board would have to modify accordingly if that happens. But fiscal work that we do, Amber, would you have anything to add to that?
You're on mute.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the original question.
The original question is, were there any other impacts on the homelessness work that we're doing as far as supporting that group?
No additional fiscal impact. A lot of their impacts are really directly related to grants and dispersing those grant dollars. I know the group is in the process of working on another grant, and Mayor Clark may be able to help me out with where that money is coming from exactly. But a lot of their money really ends up being passed through dollars because they take the money in, they provide a routing to the service, and then provide the service agencies the funding to go do the work out on the ground.
Okay, so you don't see it reflected in the COGS budget?
Just other than fiscal agent work, some small administrative overhead work.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, in this particular budget, we are still reflecting the Continuum of Care's budget in mirror to their budget because I wasn't sure of the timing of the transition. So it is reflecting in the COG budget, but we'll be transitioning them out at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Okay. Yeah, not related to the budget, but maybe just something for future consideration. If there's a way to update the members on those programs and grants that have been applied for or received, or if we're at that stage yet, because it was my understanding it was going to take a little while to get there before we could actually apply, be eligible and apply and potentially receive funding. So maybe an update at some point on where all that.
Mayor Clark, do you think that'd be okay?
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah, we've been able to bring in some pretty substantial grants, including the ESG-CV grant, which is $5.5 million. So we've been able to get up and running. I think one of the keys was it will be a little while before the grant, the volume of grants generates sufficient funds to pay all of administrative costs. So that's a startup time period, but I don't anticipate that it will impact the COG budget significantly, except
right.
with the funding to pay for the administrative services and other support that the COG provides. But if you want an update on what the Alliance is doing.
We
lost your sound there. We lost your
Kathy.
audio, Kathy. We got everything up to update on what the Alliance is doing. You're muted.
Denise,
You are muted.
May we also check, because it looks like, okay, Sharon is still here, but just note that, I'm so sorry, outgoing chair had to leave, she noted. So we're still okay, Denise? Okay.
We didn't catch most of that report, Kathy, but if we could at a different date, just get a more robust report for that, I would appreciate it. I believe that should have answered Sharon's question. Is that right? Did we have any other questions from the group? I'm looking, I don't see any. I'd just like to offer a comment, which is that I really appreciate staff putting together this budget, particularly you, Scott, coming in as a new executive director and kind of keeping the train running on time, so to speak. In particular, given what a challenging year it's been for the region. And I just wanted to say, as chair of the organization, I feel a lot of gratitude to work with an organization that is so central to solving so many of the region's problems. Just in this conversation and the questions that we've heard, assisting with the fire recovery in the canyon, assisting with homelessness and transportation, which to my mind are the three top issues in the region. And oh, by the way, housing, which is another top issue. So anyway, kudos to the staff. I really appreciate your work, and kudos as well to the board members for your service in this group with regard to this budget. Do we have any further discussion on the budget? Seeing none. Any amendments for the budget? Seeing none. I would like to close the Mid-Willamette Valley budget meeting, Council of Governments budget meeting at 4:27 p.m. And with that, I would like to entertain a motion adopting resolution 2021-09. Do we have a motion?
Cameron, so moved.
Chair Cameron moves the adoption of the resolution. Is there a second?
Commissioner Kula, second.
Commissioner Kula seconds. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the budget. Is there any discussion at this time? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving the budget, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Seeing none, the budget passes unanimously, I believe 16-0. And with that, I would like to adjourn the budget hearing and open up a discussion on approving the finance software transition project. And with that, I would like to hand the reins back to Scott.
Thank you. And thank you for your kind words, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that and the support of the board and the budget committee in getting us to this point, as well as recognizing the staff and all the hard work that they did to not only get through a strange fiscal year, but also to be able to prepare for the next part. And that is the next fiscal, not only the next fiscal year, but hopefully good things moving forward and getting back together and seeing everyone. On the financial software transition, the board at a previous meeting created a subcommittee, procurement committee, and serving as the procurement board now with your procurement hat on. As a little bit of background, Amber's going to supplement as we move along here. Amber and her team put together a request for information and solicited interested companies to come in and improve our software system. We were using an old software system. It worked. It worked specifically. We had very good staff who could work it, but it was not transitional necessarily. It was not transitional if a third party all of a sudden shows up and says, I'm just going to pick this up and run with it. It wasn't there. If the board will also recall, we had some concerns that were raised in the audit, and we wanted to make sure that we were doing two things with the financial software. One is the hardware and software that actually runs the system, and the system that we use as a modified or a full out accrual fund accounting system, but also the ability to educate and process with our staff how we move forward. And we're doing both of those things. So we're going to talk to you about the software, but I also want you to understand that it's also about, the hardware. I want to mention that this is also software driven, meaning people. This is all about how we get to a system that is sustainable and transferable between groups of people. And that's the other thing we wanted to make sure of. So when they went out, and this was reviewed with the committee, we put out and received back information from 1, 2, 3, 4 different groups. Those being Red Wing, Cassell, QuickBooks, and Sage Intact. And they scored, the committee, procurement committee scored these and looked at these and talked about them. The cost for the one that we're recommending has the lowest upfront capital cost, but it also requires us to make sure that we can transition. We use the term consultant, but the truth is we've had staff transitioning since I've been here in the financial area. And so using those staffing services that we've had to date, we have to consider 2 things. When we talk to each of these software companies, a lot of times they'll bake in the transition costs to their software presentation. And then we're left with, how do we estimate the time that it takes us to then keep things going and transition what we have to and spend the time to get up to speed on the new software. The recommendation by the procurement committee is to go with QuickBooks at a price of $1,800. Now, as you can imagine, that puts all the transition costs back on us. And so what we're recommending is transition costs of $60,000 and not to exceed. That is just time and effort to transition materials out of one system into a new system, verify it, test it, make sure it works, and still keep the lights on here while we're doing it. We have actually, Amber, 2 new staff people coming on at the same time. So we're going to all be learning this together. So the timing is good. We'll be able to close out our books in our current system, and then we'll be able to transition that information and transfer that into the new system so that we start with a new fresh set of books. So our recommendation is to move forward with the project. We do have dollars in the budget to do this, and it is the recommendation of the procurement committee to go with QuickBooks. Amber, am I correct in that?
Yes.
We gave you a report and put that in here. Are there any questions that I can answer at this time or Amber can answer?
Sharon.
Sorry. You guys will be pleased to know that this is my last meeting, so you won't have all these questions.
No, we appreciate the questions.
So, Scott, I really appreciate that you started this conversation with reference to the notes from the auditors, the audit findings on internal controls.
Yes.
So can you clarify for us how you anticipate software addressing those internal control weaknesses that were identified? Because there were a significant number.
Yes.
You know, and software is only as good as the the inputs and the all of that. It can certainly help, but in reading through those and just the number of them, how do you anticipate software addressing all of those internal control weaknesses?
Okay, I'm going to answer from a 20,000 foot. Amber, if you'd like to go dive a little bit further. First off, our software system was not transitional. So we've had for the last 6 months, third-party people in the building interacting with our financial software. In a modified accrual or accrual accounting, fund balance, fund accounting and government, those standards are pretty normal. Our system, current system, it had to be designed by the person who put it together and kept it together, and quite frankly, did a great job of keeping it together. But it was also, you had another set of books in Excel, and then you had another set of books that you were transitioning and sometimes even doing it by hand from system to system. So the system wasn't talking to each other. That's important for us because we interact with, at any given time, maybe 3 or 4 different systems. But when they speak the same language in fund accounting, that helps. So the first thing we were trying to solve is make sure that it was in a language and in a setup and a set of chart of accounts that makes sense if I do chart of accounts in North Carolina or in South Carolina or Virginia where I was, they're the same numbers generally every place you go. 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s. They have numbers that make sense. You know you're in general fund. You know you're in water and sewer. You know you're in enterprise, or there are certain charts, and that's what the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, calls as those standards that we try to use. So the first thing the software does is it gets us into a language that can now talk to others. Secondly, it is able to be picked up by, I fall over, somebody else can come in and pick up where you were, because the software is a normal software that you find in other places. Our old software wouldn't even forward historical information sometimes. So if I wanted to go back and get something from December, it wasn't going to do it. It was only where it was at the time. Amber can explain the specifics better. So those are the kinds of things that we were looking. The fact that it came in the price it did really made us happier. We really didn't need, we have a very different setup here in that while we do fund accounting, we're also managing cash. And because we're chasing receivables at the end of the month to make make our numbers work at the end of the month, because we contract services and those kinds of things. So this software allows us to do all of those things in a consistent manner. QuickBooks, I was surprised to know, Amber will tell you this, I was very skeptical at first. I come from the old school that says, QuickBooks, that's my dad's software for taxes, and it's not. It's actually a very robust system used by many of our members in modified and accrual accounting, fund accounting in our region alone. So we had good recommendations on the product itself. So that's the first part. The second part is what I talked about when I talked about beefing up the backbone of finance, making sure that we had enough people so that we could do the segregation of duties. The third thing, that doing a new software and a transition program with new staff and the timing that we're doing it is we're going to learn it together. And then after we learn it together, we're going to forward policies and procedures back to the board to make sure that we've aligned our operating system to the way we manage our people and the way our people input and output data to our policies. So this gives us a chance to do it all at once. And I think that will answer a lot of their questions.
Thank you. A lot of the terminology that you used and a lot of that makes my heart go pitter patter. So thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome.
Yeah. So, but just a thought going forward for the council is, and I don't know, Mike, I apologize, or Mike, Scott, I apologize if you're doing this now already. Maybe just a periodic update to the council on those, the status of those audit findings, because again, pretty significant from a risk-based.
Yes.
So maybe an update periodically to the group on the.
Can I clarify your question, Sharon? You were suggesting that the staff provide an update on movement towards achieving the recommendations in the audit. Got it. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Scott. We've had some of that at the executive level in going through this allocation process. Scott, can I just jump in? I just wanted to make a comment to kind of succinctly encapsulate what I believe we're doing to address the concerns that you raised, Sharon, because they are valid ones. And you just said all of this. I'm just going to say it more briefly. But my impression was that the previous system we had just couldn't generate a lot of the basic reports we needed without significant workarounds. And in the technology world, it was what we refer to as a kludge, which is a cobbled together system that is basically making things work, but is really not adequate to the task of a complicated accrual based system. And so we're moving to an industry standard system. It's a kind of a system that people with expertise are going to be familiar with, and we've increased our staffing to improve the accounting. Is that kind of a summary, Scott, of where we're at with that?
Yes. Okay. Amber, any other thing you would add to that? Is that, I think that does it.
I think the other thing that I would add is we're also documenting our processes and procedures for things like the data entry, who enters it, when it gets entered, what reports are to be run. So, should something happen to a staff member, they, maybe need to be gone for a period of time, anyone else should be able to come in and see a basic set of instructions on how to perform the task day to day.
And that really goes a long way to answering the audit's questions.
Sal, I'll move that we approve the recommendation contained in the packet.
Thank you, John. It's been moved to approve the recommendation. Is there a second?
Commissioner Kula will second.
It's seconded by Commissioner Kula, moved by Mayor McCardle. Is there any further discussion? No discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. I believe that motion passes 16-0. Thank you, staff, for that report.
Thank you.
I think that takes us to the end of our business for the meeting today. It's a tradition of the Council of Governments, since we are trying to improve regional coordination, to open up the floor for any kind of local news that might have regional significance. So if anybody has any comments from their local jurisdiction that are for the good of the order, Chair would entertain those comments at this time. Mayor Dalton.
Hi, Carol and I often, every year, as a matter of fact, host the mayors at our coalition dinner, summer dinner, and we skipped it this July for obvious reasons, COVID being the main one, and we'd like to catch up with that in September. We're looking at the 1st of September, which is a Wednesday, unless somebody thinks that's a bad date or a bad idea.
Great.
Okay,
So-
1st of September, then we'll arrange a caterer, and you mayor types are invited.
Party for the mayors at Mayor Dalton's house. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, Roxanne, I see you just unmuted.
Yeah, I was going to say, Chair Peralta, what we'll have to do is coordinate something that's the counselors, party.
The rabble party, sure.
We can send you the leftovers. That's how.
Okay, any other comments for the good of the order? Seeing none, I will move to adjourn this meeting at 4:43. Thank you so much for your time, everybody, today.
Thank you so much, Chair.
Bye, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.